Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. I'm your host, Jess Root, from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL wire site covering the Arizona Cardinals. And with me on this edition of the show is co-host Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site, and of course also one of the hosts of the original Draft Breakdown podcast, a podcast I will continue to plug, especially for this time of year. We're not talking draft in this edition of the show. We're in episode 410. There's still free agency news to talk about with the Arizona Cardinals because they have not been super active, which makes it a kind of a slow bits and pieces adding, but we do have some stuff. Correct, Seth? What are your takeaways just overall from free agency? Because it feels like it's very slow and calculated thus far.
It makes sense, man. I think, you and I talk about it a lot off the air. We text each other a lot about it. This was always going to be a rebuild, and this was always going to be a kind of transition year where you were having to move some pieces and do some things and maybe even sign some guys that normally wouldn't have been on high priority lists. But you got to remember that despite your quarterback only being paid $16 million, which I think is like the fourth highest cap hit on the team this year, you only came in with 35-ish million, 40-ish million in cap space, and you had 32 roster spots to fill. So you're gonna get a lot of these signings where you go, I thought they were trying to improve, and it's like, no, they are, but like that's gonna take maybe not a year of step back, but maybe not a year of great improvement from the names on the roster. It's not saying that they're not going to get better coached, better prepared.
This is going to have to be, as it looks right now, a gritty team,
right?
That they're going to be. It's not going to be like they've got talented players, especially on offense, but defensively, it looks like so far they're going to have to be a very tough, gritty, well-disciplined team to succeed.
Right. And so that's where it's at right now. And it's just, it's unfortunate. I think fans, understandably wanted more, but at the same time, you just have to see where they are at for what it is. Like, we can lament and talk about all of the mistakes that were made leading up to this point with the last regime. But the reality is the last regime had a knack for, we'll take care of the cap mess tomorrow. And when Monty Ossenfort was hired, or Steve Keim was allowed to walk away, that was really what started this. Is it meant that the next GM was likely, not positively, but was likely going to have to come in and eat that crap for a year while he figured out the roster, the situation, all of that stuff. And that's kind of where we are. And it's not fun. Trust us, is, because again, at the end of the day, Jess and I are fans first, as much as we, talk and write and stuff. We do that because we're fans and we want to see this team succeed, but we knew this is how it was going to be, right? Like this was going to be an unfortunate rebuilding and retooling year.
And so far, like, their splash in free agency was Kaiser White. That's not much of a splash.
No, it's not. But that's the thing. There's nothing wrong with how they're doing it or
Nope.
what they're doing, and
It's not very exciting because this is the
that's
time of year.
100% what it is.
Even when fans understand the situation, there is the feeling of missing out because you're seeing this news across the NFL of other teams making moves, doing this, and you're like, but Cardinals do something, and you understand it. Just and as writers we get to write about the team in terms of content. It's far more exciting when they make exciting moves. It moves the needle. Page views hit. More people like when the Cardinals do things that are exciting. Everyone benefits, including us, but we understand why it's doing it. But in this edition of the show, episode 410, we're going to kind of what we've done the last two shows. So what Seth and I did in our last show together, and also what I did on the solo show last weekend. We're going to talk about just type of moves they made. We're going to talk about some new guys that they've re-signed that have come back to the team, what it means for those positions. We're going to look at 3 new signings from outside the organization, what they mean, what they still need to address. And we've addressed the DeAndre Hopkins potential trade that still hasn't happened, but kind of feels like it will, and kind of what we think is coming up. So let's start with the re-signings that some of them haven't technically signed. They are agreed to terms that will sign. Since the show I did myself, we have 3 new additions that were announced on Tuesday. Actually announced over the last couple of days. One is the return of quarterback David Blau. He comes back on a 1-year deal. He was originally a restricted free agent. However, it didn't make any sense to offer him a restricted free agent tender. No reason you need to guarantee him $2.7 million. And so he comes back on what is surely to be a minimum deal. They, on Tuesday, agreed to terms with cornerback Antonio Hamilton, so he comes back for a 3rd season. He gets a 1-year deal worth up to $2 million. $1.5 million is fully guaranteed between his salary and his signing bonus of more than $300,000. Basically, assures him a spot on the roster. Basically, that is a piece that is returning, and then Jonathan Ledbetter. Defensive lineman, was an exclusive rights free agent. The Cardinals offered him a 1-year tender. If he wants to play in the NFL, he had to sign it. So he signed it, and so he returned. So what does that mean? So let's start with David Blau. What does that mean for the quarterback room? Because you and I have thrown out names out there. Okay, Case Keenum, Teddy Bridgewater, everyone across the local media, the internet, national media, all had eyes on Jacoby Brissett as a potential for to get signed because the connection with, Jonathan Gannon, the connection with Drew Petzing, and everything involved. The fact that, he was drafted by the Patriots when Monty Austinfort was there. It was a perfect match. He's kind of been a bridge quarterback his entire career, but he gets a legitimate starting job or opportunity to start with the Washington Commanders. Teddy Bridgewater, Case Keenum, other guys like that. And so far, nothing. And right now the quarterback was Kyler Murray, going to be out for a while. Colt McCoy, limited this offseason after an offseason procedure. And now David Blau. What do you think that signing means for the quarterback room?
I think it just means that there's 2 things. First is going to be that they feel that they're going to be able to count on Colt McCoy. McCoy's kind of been, obviously there's nothing going on, but he's been out with an injury at this point. And, everybody's kind of been like, what's the injury? What's going on? And so I think that means that. And I think the second thing it means is that they're fairly confident that it's not going to be an extended time without Kyler Murray going into the season. Because as we've talked about with Colt McCoy, dozens of times on this podcast, Colt McCoy's great for 1 or 2 games, but unfortunately for Colt McCoy, that's typically all he's healthy for, right?
Yeah, he is the way he is built. The ways he takes hits, it seems like he absorbs them differently. He's a tough dude, but yeah, it's like He had the pec thing last year in 2021. He had the shoulder. He got the neck. He had a concussion. So there's always something, a little something. I mean, he missed 4 games this year of a strained calf muscle from practice.
Yeah, and so you just look at it, you've got to understand, I think for us that just means that they feel confident that, McCoy will be good to go this summer and obviously at the beginning of camp. But 2, that they're not going to be without Kyler for too long, because you would have to think that they're going to push a little harder to get what they would consider an upgrade.
Something
if Kyler was going to be out
right.
for 8 to 12 weeks.
Right. That's why a lot of people thought Jacoby Brissett, why would Jacoby Brissett come here unless he knew he was going to be starting for a significant portion of the year? Teddy Bridgewater. We felt that now money-wise, we wondered if they would be able to do that, but especially with a new coaching staff, a new general manager, new front office, because they didn't necessarily have the same belief in Colt McCoy that Steve Keim and Cliff Kingsbury did, that it would be reasonable to look for a potential upgrade. So, Colt McCoy, who is clearly a backup, and to go with someone who is higher end backup, low end starter. Kind of that who's had that. Teddy Bridgewater fits the bill. Jacoby Brissett fits the bill. Those type of guys all fit the bill. Guys that you don't love, but you can live with for a little while. And I wondered about that. And even it wasn't necessarily because we heard in our back channels of whispers and rumors that Blau was not necessarily the quarterback they wanted back. That they wanted to sign Josh Dobbs, but would signing Josh Dobbs have felt any better than signing David Blau? I don't think so. They're exactly the same caliber of quarterback. The only difference is that Josh Dobbs has, Monty Austin-Ford has the connection with had him on the roster, but at the same time, David Blau has the connection through Dave Sears because he made the team in Detroit, was a free agent, an undrafted free agent when Sears was in charge of college scouting. So obviously, Sears knew about Blau the entire time going into it. And so it feels like, we'll have to wait and see if there is even another quarterback at it, even if Blau's, talent level, like kind of this same level of play. As we approach the offseason program, if they don't add another quarterback, that suggests that Colt McCoy is not going to be that limited. That when they get down to the football activities, that between Colt and David Blau, and then inevitably there will be another quarterback that will be added to the roster after the draft, whether they will draft one or they will sign one as an undrafted rookie or whatnot. They will add another quarterback so that when OTAs come around and minicamp comes around, that they will have, in fact, at least 2 to 3 quarterbacks who can take snaps, because you need that many so you don't wear down your quarterback in the offseason. But it feels like, and we wondered about that, what was the confidence level in Colt McCoy going into this season? Apparently, the confidence level is he is the option to start, which, we've seen what he could do. It was just a matter of, did the new coaching staff believe in him the same amount? We look at Antonio Hamilton. The fact that he does get more money than he did before. Last season, it was basically a league minimum with a little. He had about $500,000 of his salary guaranteed, which means he was going to be on the roster. Now his salary is fully guaranteed this year, more than $1.1 million. It's the league minimum, and he gets $355,000 to sign, and he gets another up to $500,000 in playing time incentives, up to $2 million. That leaves him with the quarterback room of Marco Wilson, Antonio Hamilton, Christian Matthew, Jace Whitaker. They just let go. And he was an exclusive rights free agent. They didn't even bother to offer a tender. And then I believe Nate Hairston signed to a futures contract. And so you have a very unimpressive cornerback room, but you now at least have 2 guys that we've seen start and play pretty okay. What do you think that this is it with the cornerback moves until draft time?
You look out there and you wonder what could they have? I'm actually in the middle of trying to find this. Did the Patriots just release Jalen Mills? Was that like
That's fairly recently, yes.
Okay. So I mean, and by the way, that's like not saying like, oh, that's a huge upgrade, right? Or anything like that, but that's a veteran name that's played a lot of football. So going through it.
And was Mills I know Mills was in Philly. Was that in before 2021, or did he play there 2021 and go to the Patriots in 2022?
He went to New England 21.
Okay, so Gannon never had him.
No. So, but you look at it. I mean, you see that he started 26 games in 2 seasons for the Patriots. I mean, I know it's not the Super Bowl winning Patriots. I mean, they were the number 2 defense in the league his first year there in terms of scoring, and then they were the 11th defense in the league last year, and they went down when he was not playing. So again, he's not great by any means. I don't want anybody to think I'm saying he's going to come in and change the room, but he's a guy that could be out there. You've got
it gives you 3 guys can start.
Right. And then a couple other guys, Rocky Sin, we've talked about before. I think he was in Indy with Gannon, right?
I believe so.
And then you've got Rocky Sin, you got where did the other name? Yeah, Mills is available. That's okay. I just was double checking that. And then you've got where did the other name go that I was just looking at? But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You've got some veteran guys that have Sean Murphy Bunting's still available, right?
It looks like he's going to he was set to sign, I think, either with Indy or Tennessee.
Okay, Tennessee, you're right. They just signed him 10 hours ago. Perfect. So yeah, so that's the thing. I mean, you've got guys that are available that have started, not like like when you see we'll talk about it shortly, but when you see like the LJ Collier signing, that's like a Hail Mary, right? Like that's like, hey, if we get anything out of him, fantastic. If not, not a big deal. I mean, like, let me throw a name at you. It's not sexy. Like, what about Eli Apple? I mean,
there's some higher end potential there for sure.
Right. And so like you've got guys again that have started big games, started a lot of games in the NFL that are available. And so for me, that's like, that's what you're looking for now. And I think that's why the slow burn is happening so much, is because the longer this takes, the better chances of guys getting these 1 year, 2 year low end contracts. And that's kind of where the Cardinals are living right now.
Absolutely. Right? Then Jonathan Ledbetter, he was always coming back, but he just gives them at least another body on the defensive line. Monty Austin-Fort did mention him as having played well this last season on the defensive line. They've got he's part of that youth. You got Ledbetter, you've got Richard Lawrence, you've got Lucky Fotu, but his addition just gives you another body that you need at least to start the off season. But coming up next on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk about. Let's move on and talk about their new additions from outside the organization. We've got 3 signings to. We've got 3 signings to 3 signings to talk about. That's coming up next on Rise Up Sea Red. You're back on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talking of the Cardinals. Made 3 outside signings or agreed to terms. 3 outside free agents are joining the team over the last couple of days, Monday, Tuesday. The first would be Zach Pascal, former Eagles and former Colts wide receiver, a guy that Jonathan Gannon knows quite well from both teams. LJ Collier, former first-round pick for the Seahawks that was, flamed out tremendously as a pass rusher, as a first-round pass rusher. And then also on Tuesday, adding former Tennessee Titans offensive lineman Dennis Daly. Let's talk about the Zach Pascal. I don't know if his addition means a DeAndre Hopkins trade is coming, but if you have a trio of Marquise Brown, Rondale Moore, and Zach Pascal, or is it Pascal? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's Pascal, but I don't know. And if you listen to the original Draft Breakdown podcast, I don't care.
So, but at least he gives you something different. He didn't do much. Like, he's a dog on special teams. He does give you some medium. Like last year, only had 15 catches, but with the Colts, he had 2 years over 600 yards. That's medium. That's medium production. Something you'd like to see from a wide receiver 3. I have no problem with the signing, and he's exactly the sort of player that Jonathan Gannon wants on this roster.
Yeah, and the thing is, you look at it, he's a guy that is like a wide receiver 4 or 5, but he's a valuable special teams contributor, and he's and this is going to sound dumb, but he's a good run blocker. And so what we've talked about quite a bit is how the Cardinals are going to likely be running the football more. So why not get a guy that's a little bigger, a little more physical? I mean, you go back to his indie seasons, the dude had over 600 yards twice and 5 touchdowns, so it's not like he's a nobody or anything like that.
The way I describe him is, at minimum, you get a Trent Sherfield type player.
Yeah, just a bigger body portion of that.
So you get a Trent Sherfield on the low end, and on the higher end, you get an actual productive wide receiver 3.
Right, and that's and he gives the Cardinals something that they lack, and that's size. At wide receivers. I mean, you love Greg Dortch, or you love more. They're undersized guys, so it's not
right. But you've got 5'7" Greg Dortch, 5'7" Rondale Moore, 5'9" Marquise Brown. So you've got midgets. They all move extremely well, but I mean,
right. And so this is just a different size cat that is able to move. He's able to block well. He's going to give you a little bit different look, and that's what they need at the receiver position. He's not a guy. And who knows? Maybe he breaks out or whatever at age 28, but the reality is he's here because he gives you a high-end special teamer and a high-end blocking wide receiver.
The next guy that they brought in was LJ Collier, defensive end. This is an interesting signing because now you're starting to see the report from Jeremy Fallon is they plan on using him across the defensive line. He is a much bigger body than we are used to seeing as a pass rusher because he's 291 pounds, 6'2", 291. But this is definitely a guy that they're going to put primarily, I think, on the edge. Now he's a little bit bigger than the edge guys that Gannon used in Philadelphia. Their edge guys were about 260 with Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat. However, you give them an option this way. At least you can look at, okay, right now their starting defensive ends could be Cameron Thomas and now LJ Collier. LJ Collier has done almost nothing in the league. His only 3 sacks came in 2020. That was the only year he was a starter last year. He only managed to play in 8 games. It's as a first-round pick, he was a massive disappointment for the Seahawks. But there is a skill set there, and you throw him. He comes in with really just kind of a Hail Mary type thing. It's a low-risk, high-reward type thing, a player that you hope can do something.
Yeah, and when you look at the Collier signing, that's really what the Cardinals are trying to do. They're trying to find guys that were high-end prospects, players, and that, either never developed or never had the opportunity. I mean, let's be honest, the Seahawks haven't exactly been churning out defensive linemen over the last couple of years that they developed. I'm not saying that they haven't had good players, but guys that they developed. You just look at it and it's just one of those situations where you take a shot on a guy on a low salary and see if you can, find a diamond in the rough. They list him at 6'2", 291. There's no way he's that size, right?
If you look at photos, he's a big dude. Maybe that maybe that was the issue, that he was trying to play on the edge at that size. But maybe they get him to lean down, and he has the potential to play a little bit inside, or okay. Here's this between the scouting department, the Austin Fort, the Patriots, and the Lions. Maybe they had him playing a different role, and maybe he will be, like when they say all over the defensive line, maybe he will be more of an interior guy.
Yeah, and like you said, maybe he plays end and base if he's on the field, and then moves interior as a pass rusher type of thing.
Yeah, because but at least, like, even on the interior, you're giving yourself some options other than Ledbetter and Fotu and Lawrence. Well, now you got Kevin Strong, but it's a bunch of so far their defensive line that they have, the interior. You've got the promise. You've got a little bit of promise with Cam Thomas. I don't know what they're going to do with Myjai Sanders this year. Like, what do they do with him? But with the rest of the defensive line right now is just guys. Guys. And with Collier with honestly, the highest end ceiling except maybe Cam Thomas, just depending on how that goes. Then the other addition was Dennis Daly. Titans fans were not sad to see him go. Dennis Daly started 15 games at left tackle last season, was really kind of not great. Gave up 12 sacks, according to Pro Football Focus, which I think led the league. Here's the thing. Cardinals fans shouldn't get too upset about this signing because they technically already have their starting tackles in DJ Humphries and Kelvin Beachum. And even at that, you could even throw Josh Jones in there. Dennis Daly just gives you he wasn't supposed to be a starter last year, for one. Let's remind he wasn't supposed to, but he's a solid low end starter who you can have on your bench, who can play tackle and guard. And if you have guys on your bench who you can count on to be at least a low end starter, instead of you could say he was terrible. Maybe he was terrible as a left tackle, but he was also a part-time starter at guard for the Panthers when he first came into the league. I'm not upset about this. The only thing for me that's interesting about this signing, because if you bring him in intending for him to be like your backup swing tackle, that tells me something about Josh Jones. That maybe he is going to be that they do project him to play left guard, and that little insight that Justin Pugh had might have come with a little bit of inside information. And if you've got Josh Jones as your starter, left guard, you've got Kelvin Beachum and DJ Humphries as your two tackle starters. And you've got Dennis Daly, who could come off the bench. He's a versatile backup. As long as you don't have to count on him to start the entire season, that would be disappointing. That would just be disappointing. And maybe, honestly, maybe he would be an okay right tackle, and he was playing left tackle because, Taylor Lewan went down.
Yeah, man, and people just get upset and want to overreact or fly off the handle to every signing. The Daily signing just is a veteran signing that gives them some insurance at positions, because you go into the offseason again something, or go into the draft, something you and I talked about off the air, and you've got on paper probably DJ Humphries at left tackle, Josh Jones at left guard. I'll let you pronounce the center's name.
Yelda Froholt.
Yeah, Yelda Froholt at center, Will Hernandez at right guard, and Kelvin Beachum at right tackle. And so one of the things that you and I have discussed that we've lamented in the past is how, the Cardinals typically bring in a guy like Daly to start over 6-round rookies that they brought in, and then those 6-round rookies and go, being roster guys at other places. Sometimes they catch on or they don't, whatever. But this time they brought in a guy that's a backup to be a backup, in case. And you look at it, and between Froholt and Beachum and maybe even Josh Jones, there's still the ability to upgrade those positions in the draft. And so, I don't get the overreaction to Daly. He was bad, man. It is what it is. You can't sugarcoat it, but at the same time, I don't think they're bringing him in to start. If they, all overreact if he's starting.
Well,
and there's
and
injury.
Look at the options they have. If DJ Humphries goes down, Dennis Daly's your fourth option at left tackle. Let's be honest. If DJ goes down, you've got Josh Jones, then you've got Kelvin Beachum, and then you've got Dennis Daly.
Right. And so that's the thing. So, that's why I just, there's so much hand wringing over every signing or every move they made this offseason. And it's sometimes they are, the Collier thing is kind of like the slightly different, obviously, but like the Jeff Gladney signing last year, right?
Yeah.
See if a former first-round pick that had issues, obviously Gladney's were off the field
stuff.
Can catch, a break or just need to change the scenery. I mean, we talk about it all the time with Cardinals first round picks going elsewhere and excelling. So why not? So
that'd be kind of good. Coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best of our Cardinals talk on the web. Let's discuss what they still need to do. The Cardinals still have moves that they need to address. What are positions that are kind of must do's before we hit the draft? That's coming up next. The Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise of See Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. They've almost hit everywhere where I think they need to. But however, I think I still think number one, your glaring hole is still that center position. You're with Yelda Froholt, you guess okay, that's a guy, but still, what the heck? What are you doing at center? Because if Yelda Froholt is your answer at center for this year, unless you believe something about your scouting that nobody else does, that's interesting. The center position still has to happen. I'd like to think that they're not done at corner, and I like to think that they're not done on the defensive line, at least at the edge, and probably at running back.
Yeah, you would think with what they're doing and how they want to compete that they're going to want to add a running back, right? But I mean, you look at it, I think they want to continue to upgrade at at the corner positions like we talked about earlier. I think they're still going to look for interior defensive linemen. We're kind of speculating on if and what Collier would do if he came here. And then, I mean, saying you can upgrade on the offensive line is like saying you can upgrade at corner, right? You just always need bodies.
Yeah,
and
just for me,
bodies.
the offensive, it's just the center position where I'm you still that's Yelda Froholt's not a plan, is it? That's not really their plan.
Right, and that's kind of what we're saying. If they go into the season and Froholt's the starter, then we can start to panic a little. Interestingly, though, about the center position, it's almost like, and again, I go back to what I said earlier, they're slow playing a lot of this, and it just seems purposeful. It
might be because
calculated.
Ryan Kelly, even though the Colts already paid his roster bonus, unless it has not been reported, and they quietly delayed the roster bonus for a potential trade. Ryan Kelly makes a lot of sense for the Cardinals. He is kind of like the 1 year younger version of Rodney Hudson, been a really high performer, only here's a big difference. He knows the coaches here. The position coach coached him there. Clayton Adams was an assistant offensive line coach at Indy. Jonathan Gannon would know Ryan Kelly. You've also got Ben Jones on the open market right now, former Titans center. He had a failed physical designation for the Titans, but obviously Monty Austin-Fort would know who he is. He's been a starting caliber center for several seasons. there are a couple options. And then, of course, you've got the draft. But I hope, maybe, I don't know. Maybe things change because like the two names that when we talked about with the draft, obviously you got the kid coming out of Minnesota, you've got Ohio State's Luke Whippler, who are guys you feel like maybe you could throw into the starting lineup. But even if he doesn't have to start this year, you've got the answer to center moving forward. But I don't want to go into the draft expecting to find a starting center I don't want Yelda Froholt to be the answer going into the draft.
Right, and that should be the big thing for them, right? It just seems like they need to address the center position, but I just don't know what's out there. I mean, is Sam Mustipher still available? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, but the two names I know, like three names that I know that Ryan Kelly potentially available for trade. Ben Jones, former Titans. I think Connor McGovern, the former Jets, is still on the market as well.
What about Austin Blythe? Is he still out there too?
I think so.
I wish these things would get updated quicker.
Yeah, Spot Track used to be really good about that. And Spot Track's tracker is really not good.
Yeah, it looks like Blythe is still a free agent. Okay. So, I mean, you've got some options, like you said. I wouldn't say you have guys that you're like, beating down the door to start. But if they're a starter, I mean, he started 17 games last season for the Seahawks. He was the starter at center, I believe, when the Rams lost to the Packers in the playoffs in 2020. So I mean, you're talking about a guy that's started a ton of games. He's older. He's a veteran. I mean, there are still options available, which makes me think that they're going into this whole situation, especially the draft, where there's three guys to know, in Luke Whippler, John Michael Schmitz, and I'm spacing the other guy's name off the top of my head. Oh, Joe Tippmann of Wisconsin as like three guys that could play the pivot, that could start as rookies. And so I think it's almost like they're like, hey, these guys are all back burner guys, right? Like if we're not able to get the center we want in the draft, kind of like what happened last year, at least we've got these guys out there still. They're veterans. You mentioned Ben Jones, you mentioned Connor McGovern. I mean, hell, even like a John Feliciano. These are all guys that have started games in the NFL that could come in and start for a year while you figure out the position. They're not going to be 5-6 year starters, but they could be guys that give you a year, maybe even 2 years without any issues or without any, and you don't have to start a Sean Harlow or a Billy Price.
Yeah, I guess Billy Price is still available. Let's kind of go position by. Do you think they have any moves left at quarterback before the draft?
Quarterback?
No,
I don't think so.
Running back. So. Do you think they'll sit tight till the draft and then either draft a guy or get a guy after the draft who's been around?
Yeah, and again, I apologize if these guys have been signed. We're just kind of going off of what's available, and they're not getting updated as quickly as they used to, which is kind of odd, right? The one name that's interesting to me is Kareem Hunt. He's been part kind of a split backfield. He gives you, but he's also been a bell cow.
Yeah.
He's obviously not getting
and he was, there's the Browns connection with Drew Petzing, so that makes sense.
And he's obviously not getting the traction he was expecting on the open market. I don't think that would be a bad name. And again, like,
especially if you can get him on, say, the James Conner contract that you got him for a couple of years ago, say a $1 3/4 million. Like basically, you either wait till you give him a couple million after the compensatory period's over, or you give him the 1.75, which is the end of that threshold where that doesn't count.
Right. And so, that's a name. I'm trying to look here.
Leonard Fournette's still on the board. There's some names.
Fournette.
J.D. McKissick, Mark Ingram, Rex Burke. I'm like, he's old. I'm like,
Yeah, the other name that's intriguing is
there's also the other Browns guy, Dearness Johnson.
Yeah, I was going to say Johnson is intriguing, but the other one that is intriguing, and it might be like a post-draft, post-off season, because he's old, man, but Latavius Murray ran pretty well last year for the Broncos.
Yeah.
A little bit of time, and he's another big physical back, right?
Yeah, that would make sense. Wide receiver, I don't know if they're going to add another receiver right now.
I don't think so. Not unless
obviously DeAndre Hopkins is going to get traded, we think, but
right.
Yeah, I don't know what anything else in terms of that. Tight end, we will see back of the roster guys, I'm certain, because Trey McBride, you need someone else. You need some blocking guys. Offensive line, center position, defensive line. We kind of talked about. Do you see?
By the way, you ran through those real quick. I was just going to mention. I think that the fact that like Jesse James and Jeff Swaim are both free agents. James was with Cleveland last year, and Swaim was in Tennessee. I mean, those are kind of exactly what you're talking about, right?
Those are little, like in the baseball terms, those are base hits. Those are just, base hit signings that you guys can, fill a roster spot with a guy that you guys know. Do you think they'll go more interior or more edge with defensive line signings?
I would think it would be interior. And there's one of the guys we mentioned, Tyre Tart, got a second round qualifying offer from the Titans, so obviously he's off the board. Philadelphia, the only guys left are Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh, and I'm going to
Suh's only going to go. He's going to sign late with a team that's competing.
Right. I was going to say only a team that's competing. So you look at it now. I don't know anybody that. We mentioned it the other day. Ashawn Robinson's a guy that's played a lot of football, played a lot of snaps. He could make some sense, right? Like a big body on the interior.
Michael Brockers, but Brockers didn't even play last year for the Lions.
Right. And so, it's tough, man. Like Matt Ioannidis is another interesting one. He's another big body guy on the interior. But yeah, for the most part, like it would probably likely be guys that aren't going to move the needle.
Yeah, probably. And then I think at the off the ball, you've got Kaiser White, you've got your linebackers already set. You're going to see other signings. Those are like special teams. Like as it is, they got 4 guys. So you've got your 3 starters plus Zeke Turner. Safeties. I mean, you're going to see bodies there. I just think in terms of players of note, maybe a cornerback, because it would be nice if you go into the draft having 3 guys you can count on being starters. I do not think that Christian Matthew is a guy you can count on being a starter.
No, not yet. Definitely not.
If he developed, that's cool, but you don't want to count on that.
Right, exactly.
He was a 6th round rookie last year.
And from a really, really small school. Like I don't think that can be understated.
You've got Marco Wilson, you got Antonio Hamilton, and Antonio Hamilton, even though like he impressed the coaching staff, he's still on the bottom end of like starter quality guys that you want to count on. So please, let's see another starting caliber cornerback, a starting center, defensive line depth, maybe like blocking tight end, maybe a complimentary back to James Conner. But yeah, it's been a very, like, I guess the word you can use for free agency, it's just been lackluster. There's nothing exciting that they've done. When Kaiser White has been like the pinnacle of their free agent signings, and we can't expect, they still have cap room, but they're going to have to use a lot of cap room for their draft class, especially if they acquire more picks. And so yeah, and there's a couple things they can do, like Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, his contract extension will save some cap space, and you're going to get some more cap space, assuming that DeAndre Hopkins is traded. And let's move on to that. In fact, so coming next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best of our Cardinals talk on the web. Let's discuss DeAndre Hopkins' future, because it doesn't feel like it never. We'll talk about it. That's coming next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise of C-Red podcast, best of our Cardinals talk on the web. DeAndre Hopkins still on the Cardinals roster, and it feels like the Cardinals know what they want. They want a second-round pick plus something. But when Jalen Ramsey gets traded for a third-rounder and change, and Brandon Cooks gets traded for basically like the Robbie Anderson deal, are the Cardinals going to get what they want? Are they going to be able to get a second-round pick out of Hopkins?
Yeah, I think so. I think what's going to end up happening, and people are going about it the inverse way, but I mean, the reality is there's still not a lot of talent at the receiver position. So I think they're just holding their cards until a team's like, okay, well, this is what we need to do. And it makes sense. I mean, there's no reason to panic
until after the draft, because he has to get traded. You need to trade him before the draft to make it worth your while. Otherwise, you need him to play.
And that's the biggest thing, is like you're gonna want to make sure you get adequate compensation for a guy that's still, a top 10 to 12 receiver in the NFL. And so if that's going to happen, then, you gotta make sure that you're not the one that blinks first.
The team that probably at this point makes the most sense, right? Wouldn't it be the Chiefs?
Yeah, it feels like 63 is going to be coming this way eventually, and
that would make all the sense in the world. I mean, they lost Juju Smith-Schuster. They don't have Tyreek. They need they put together a championship team without a high-end number one receiver. But are they really ready to turn over all the receiver targets to Marcus Valdes-Scantling?
Right, and Sky Moore.
DeAndre Hopkins makes all the sense there. But yeah, the Chiefs make a lot of sense, and that's not the premium day two pick. Whether they can get straight up the second round, or if they can get something else out of the Chiefs for him that sort of makes sense. Do you think that the Ravens could come into play there?
I don't think the Ravens are anything you can do or say until they figure out what's going on with Lamar Jackson. Like, either way, I
obviously
think they have to have something in mind with Lamar before this, they could make a move for a guy like DeAndre. And the latest rumors, and we're not, Ravens guys, so we just hear what we read or know what we read. But the latest rumors are that Lamar's done with the Ravens. So I just don't see how they make that move unless
that's the move to show Lamar, hey, we're committed to you. We got you big time receiver. You could use, and then we're not just going to run you into the ground. I don't know. Cowboys seem to be out because they went there. They got perhaps a better complement for CeeDee Lamb in Brandon Cooks for less draft compensation. He still owed a lot of money. Any other teams with the Patriots make sense? I mean, I think here locally the Patriots have been brought up a lot, but I don't know if they're really in play.
It's tough because it's just not something you ever see them do. I mean, I know 15 years ago they went and got Randy Moss for a lot, but like, it's just not something that we see coming from the Patriots very often. So it makes it a little more difficult. I'm looking at it. They have 46 and then they have 76. So like, would they be willing to do 46? If not, like, is 76 enough? Or like, would it have to be 76 this year and a third next year? Like, it really just feels at this point that it's going to be the Chiefs in 63, and that's going to kind of get everything done.
Could the Panthers make sense?
Why? I mean, they do make sense, but why? I mean,
young quarterback. They're going to have a rookie quarterback. They don't have a number one receiver anymore.
And I know that D-Hop can't, or he lost his no trade and everything, but it really feels like that would be going from one mess to another, right? Like that he would just be a complete issue.
I don't know about that, because they're aside from they're an ascending team. You've got Frank Reich there. Sean Jefferson is the receivers coach there. He was the receivers coach here. Adrian Wilson's in the front office there. You'll have a young quarterback coming in, and whoever that is, whether it's C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, and so maybe it's you give him the opportunity to kind of do what the Jaguars did, right? And he could be a big part of that. And I, at least in this sense, it would allow him. You definitely know that he would get used, and he would be able to put up numbers. It's also close to home. I mean, in terms of the competitiveness, I don't know if it's a great fit, but I think there's a fit there for a lot of things.
Yeah, I just don't think that would be what he's happy with. But you never know. I mean, guys are weird, right? And for him, it might be the fact that he gets a ton of touches now. He's the guy. So
because after the last couple of years, he's probably not on schedule for his career goals.
No, and you look at it. I'm trying to find the quote where it was. Sorry. You look at it. There's not a lot of teams outside of maybe the Chiefs that are contenders that are willing to or looking to move up for him. So it'll be interesting to see what they're if they're really going or contenders are going to pony up to get a guy like that. Because the other interesting thing is, and I know it's a different situation, but like, isn't it weird that there's really no movement on Odell Beckham Jr. either?
That too. No, that there's who knows. There's some talk. I mean, there's the talk of what his contract demands are, even though he said that the report is that there are no contract demands. But probably with the time off and kind of he has been a little bit of a headache sometimes where he's been, that he's also not content with league minimum, that he's better than that.
Right. And so that'll be what's interesting to, kind of see where all this falls, like, because I think, and Josina Anderson, I think just tweeted it out or did earlier today, there is a large group of agents right now that are not exactly enthralled with how free agency is going.
No, there is the talk of collusion, kind of. Yeah, this has been a very odd free agency period so far. Let me throw something out here with this came from where I don't know where it came from, but Benjamin Albright, who Seth knows, is a sometimes guest on the PHNX Cardinals podcast. Teams that are told are interested with the so there's interest and they have the picks to be able to pull it off. Patriots, Giants, Titans, and Falcons.
Yeah, that's the quote I was looking for, and I could not find it anywhere. So I'm glad you. Okay, so let's go through these. Patriots, we went through. Titans, they have 11, 41, and 72. again, the closer that creeps up to 41, the 40s, it feels like it's a little further fetched. 72, I mean, 63 versus 72. Giants have 25, 57, and 89.
57 kind of makes sense.
Yeah, they could make a lot of sense because, they just invested heavily in their quarterback. They franchise tag Saquon Barkley, and they really have nothing at wide receiver.
And Hopkins would help there. And like his contract, he's got $19 million to do this year. He said he'd work around things, and that doesn't mean he's going to take a pay cut. But with that $19 million cap hit that some team's going to take, that's easily reduced. You pay him, $10 million up front in a restructure bonus. His cap hit goes down to 14 this year, and then his cap hit next year goes up to 19. And so you can work with that. You can sign him to an extension, guarantee a little more money. Yeah, the Giants make a lot of sense, even though this is the first I've heard the Giants even considered.
I mean, I've heard their name brought up, but I didn't really, I'm going to be honest, I didn't really take it seriously. And then the Falcons have 44 and 75. Again, I think when you get into the 40s, it's a little high. So, and then it's 75. So like, are you going to get 2/3? So that's what I would look at. I mean, again, I still go back to, I just feel like 63 is kind of the sweet spot. I guess we should look at the second round. And that would, that could tell us something. So you look at it, Kansas City 63, Chicago just got DJ Moore, they're at 61, Buffalo at 59, and then 57 with the Giants. What about the Lions at 55?
Yeah, I would be good with that.
I mean, that you kind of look at it, and then the top of the third round, nothing really kind of sticks out. I mean, they're not going to send him to LA, obviously, and then Denver has 2 picks in 67 and 68. They're trying to get rid of an expensive wide receiver, right? So yeah, I mean, I think it, like you said, it could end up, if it's New England, you could be looking at a third and maybe a future third or fourth, and then same thing with a team like Tennessee. And then if it's the Giants, 57 probably could get it done, and that would be, you basically kind of recoup that second round pick. I know the Cardinals was a higher second round pick, but it is what it is.
Yeah. With that, let's wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Series podcast, Best of Cardinals talk. Although I will anticipate probably doing I might do a solo show later in the week. Depends on what's going on with the Cardinals and whatnot. But at minimum, we will be back next week. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. This is episode 410. We'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be red, see red, and of course, Rise up, see red.